Good morning and afternoon to everyone tuning in across the United States and the globe. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar. We're really excited to have attendees from Korea, Canada, Italy, and Germany, as well as local governments from 23 states in the U.S. ICLEI truly is a global network seeking and providing local solutions and empowering local governments. Again, we'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, where we are excited to unveil the monitoring module, the latest module in ClearPath, ICLEI's online emissions management platform. The monitoring module allows users to track implementation of climate action plan measures and the resulting energy savings, emissions reductions, and other indicators. My name is J.R. Kilgrew, and I'm the National Membership Coordinator and Senior Program Officer at ICLEI USA. And today's webinar will be presented by Michael Steinhoff, Program Manager of ICLEI's Tools and Technical Innovation Division at ICLEI USA. ICLEI has been hard at work to round out ClearPath since its release in March of this year as the complete platform for local governments to inventory, forecast, plan, and monitor their municipal and community scale emissions. Before we get started, we just wanted to review a couple housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat window or the question box of your GoToMeeting panel. We will be recording this webinar and posting it to our ICLEI YouTube site shortly after today. We will be following up afterwards via email with a few resources pertinent to today's webinar as well. And we do have a great agenda today, and we want to ensure that we provide today's attendees with ample time to see the monitoring module and as well to ask questions. So without further ado, let's get started. Next slide. Okay, great. So today's agenda, we're going to have a quick introduction by myself, and then Mike Steinhoff will be going through a ClearPath update, as well as providing a monitoring module demo, as well as just introducing new monitoring calculators, showing the updates to the inventory calculators, as well as showing the new monitoring reports, as well as new inventory reports. And finally, we'll hopefully leave about 15 minutes for question and answers. Next slide. So we did want to provide all the attendees today with some updates around the ICLEI and our network. First and foremost, we did want to let folks know about Carbon, ICLEI's global reporting platform, which already has 488 cities. And we are really proud to be a part of this and to provide this reporting platform to enhance transparency, accountability, and credibility of climate action of local and subnational governments. We'd also like folks to know that it has been designated as the central repository of the Compact of Mayors launched at the Climate Summit of 2014. And so we just want to let everyone know that there's a big opportunity to register for ClearPath and enter your data by December 7th for the potential of being recognized as the 500th city on Cities Day at the COP in Lima on December 8th. We'd also like everyone to know that we are rounding out our members-only webinar series on December 16th, where we will be highlighting the Office Depot Implementation Pack recipients of Houston, Texas, Cupertino, California, West Palm Beach, Florida, and then Charlottesville, Virginia, which has been running its own Green Business Challenge with ICLEI for the last year or so. Additionally, we'd also like folks to know about the opportunity for your elected official at your local government to become the 200th signatory for the Resilient Communities for America campaign. And if folks aren't familiar, the RC4A campaign is a campaign to champion the leadership of hundreds of local elected officials who commit to creating stronger, more prepared communities that can bounce back from extreme weather, energy, and economic challenges. But we'd also like to take a moment to welcome and let the network know about the most recent communities to join ICLEI. And we're really proud to announce that Columbus, Ohio, Lakewood, Colorado, East Lansing, Michigan, and the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments have recently joined ICLEI in the last few weeks. So we're excited to have a robust new crop of members to join and learn and provide their best practices. Next slide. And without further ado, I'll hand the baton over to Michael Steinhoff, our Program Manager for Technical and Tools Innovation, to walk us through future developments of ClearPath and walk you through the monitoring module. Take it away, Mike.
Great. Thank you, JR, and hello, everyone. So just jumping right into a little bit of a preview of what's coming ahead before we talk about what we've just completed and the path forward for ClearPath. Wanted to also take the opportunity to let folks know that, of course, we have a ambitious development plan that continues right along with what we've been doing over the last year and building onto the tool. We've got at least $200,000 worth of development that we'll be putting into it and adding some features that I know a number of folks that are on the phone have been looking for and asking for, including ways to essentially upload data from a spreadsheet or a CSV file, doing more to pre-populate emissions factors so that you can not have to go and hunt down all the waste characterizations and various transportation factors. We'll be looking to add some features to help you share data, not only within other ClearPath users, but potentially wider in your community and make that data more public should you choose to do so. And other features that will be identified by a stakeholder working group that we'll be putting together in the next few months. We will also be looking towards integration with the Carbon Climate Registry that JR mentioned a few moments ago. Of course, that, as he mentioned also, it's the reporting platform for the Compact of Mayors, as well as Resilient Communities for America and the Earth Hour City Challenge from World Wildlife Fund. All great initiatives that ICLEI USA has been a part of, and really with the idea of reducing the burden of reporting. And this is very much tied to what we're looking at today, some of the features of the monitoring module to also help facilitate reporting of actions and really kind of take that additional step off each of your plates. We'll also be looking to develop an emissions management online community, so really kind of transferring the way that we support you all from emails and phone calls to something that's much more sort of engaging, visual, and encouraging sharing of knowledge by having an online community for answering groups, posting questions, posting answers, and again, sharing your experiences in ClearPath. Further forward, things that are maybe just a little bit beyond what we have initially scoped, but things that we are looking forward to doing and think that it's good for you all to know what we're thinking about further down the line. So really what we want to try to do with ClearPath over time is build an information ecosystem around it where we can in a lot of ways be a conduit for helping you communicate your climate action back to your community and do so in a way that helps engage the community better. So whether that's providing visualizations, maybe just open data that people can tap into, and researchers in the communities or activists can, civic tech folks can do interesting things with it and share that again with the wider community. We're also looking forward to really sort of digging in and doing some research on the data that's coming in there. There is quite a bit which is coming in, which is fantastic to see. And as that mass of data really starts to take shape a little bit more, we think we'll be able to do some really sort of game-changing analyses that have never really been able to happen before, because so often places like Carbon and the other places where we report data, we get aggregate data, and this is something that ICLEI has looked at for a long time. We get aggregate reported data. There's only so much we can understand about that, but really knowing front to end what all was in these inventories will be really beneficial, not only for us, but helping to refine the services and the other resources that we then provide back out to the network. So speaking of that data, also thought it's almost the end of 2014, so let's look back on what we've accomplished here in ClearPath, which is really impressive, and I'm thrilled by the numbers that have rolled in so far. So right now we have over 330 city accounts. Lots of cities have started using the tool. which is fantastic. Over 750 inventories have at least been started, so we have that many records in the tool. Most are community scale, but there's definitely a good number of government operations records in there as well. So that adds up to being over 10,000 individual records. So all you folks that are on the phone and other folks that have been using the tool have made over 10,000 record entries, which is very impressive. And of course, like I said, with those automatic uploads, we'll be able to make even more records even faster. That translates to over 100,000 outputs, so 100,000 individual data points, whether it's energy or some indicator value or some the different component gases of your inventory. Really just a tremendous amount of information. So very impressed. And again, just to reiterate, doing lots of work, and the growth in this is just the number of records that are in the tool, and just community. So this doesn't look at government operations, has been growing very rapidly, especially since the summertime, and a trend that we expect to continue. You're doing lots of great analyses, which is also really fun for us to see, especially people that are looking backwards. And something that we didn't really anticipate, which has been great, is seeing how many people. I mean, there's a small contingent, but they're definitely going back and entering in old historical data, even going back to 1990, and being able to look at these trends over time. Really, something that we thought people would do going forward, and would take a long time to see that come together. But this has been really, really great to see. You're also looking forwards, which is great too. That people are using the tool to do their planning, to do forecasts. This is just a quick snapshot where I took all of the sort of business as usual growth rates and normalize them, just to kind of see them all next to each other and look at all the different scenarios that people are exploring and playing with. And not only is it just interesting to look at, but great to know that activity is going on. So lots of things have been happening, and we're really excited to now take the next step and say, okay, well, we're looking at these different futures. We're recording a lot of stuff. Now we really want to start focusing in on recording actions. It's great to inventory. It's great to inventory over time, but we need to do more and add more features for monitoring, and that's just what we've done. But first, why do we monitor? So just kind of a general question to tee up the features that we've developed. One, of course, the big one is we want to understand how different measures or actions are performing. Is this measure cost effective? Is that, we can use that information to further inform decision making, share that with other practitioners, and this goes back to I'll reference Carbon again, and that being a place where cities can share the actions that they're taking and the impact that they're having, and share those ideas and get more action going in other places. Beyond that, we also want to look at the big picture, right, and see, well, what is the overall progress and the absolute changes in emissions levels from our communities, from our government operations. Are we on track to meet different targets that we have set? That's obviously very important to understand, especially as we will be continuing to, I think, refine strategies, refine climate action plans and energy plans and everything else, all the great work that you're doing. It's good to sort of check in and see what's really going on at that highest level. But we also want to understand what else is going on, and there's looking at the sort of top line of how total emissions are changing from year to year. But we want to try to understand what's really driving that change. Is it due to our actions? Is it due to something else? And can we get some indicators of success out of that and be able to tell a more nuanced story when we look from one inventory to the next? So those are the the general goals that we wanted to try to facilitate answering those questions and performing those functions with these new features. Another thing that I'll just point out before moving on is, there's kind of two tiers to this, right? There's understanding monitoring for individual measures, which is important, and then the kind of global or community scale, what's happening at the aggregate level, and those are two different questions, and we've added some things that will help address both of them, but there's still a work in progress for making these things the ultimate tool that will answer all the questions that we may have as practitioners. So a quick little example of that, and this gets to some of the way that we design the features in the tool, is that there are lots of different ways that you can assess individual measures. This is a great chart from the Institute for Building Efficiency, which I think is now getting taken into the World Resources Ross Center for Sustainable Cities, but they still have a great website, lots of great building energy resources there. But this just shows a range of kinds of programs that we may have, or kinds of actions that we have, from the very sort of small scale individual pieces of equipment up to buildings, programs, provenance, citywide, countrywide, growing scale there, and the time scale of these things. So there's lots of different approaches, right? And generally the community programs, things that you may be doing in the city, would kind of fall into that category. Those are generally big studies, and in my experience, not ones that local governments typically jump in and do on their own. They're certainly expensive to do, and this is just talking about building energy, but if it's transportation or waste, you can imagine that there are survey research and lots of other kind of program evaluation type studies, which can be pretty complex and maybe often not really what local government staff are sort of doing day to day. These other things that are kind of more on the equipment and building level, really sort of appropriate for government operations, and those are the kinds of things that I think maybe folks would end up doing. But maybe just keep a mental note of this slide as we go into the tool, mainly because for the purposes of monitoring, understanding that this is probably not activities that local governments are doing themselves, and they are also well beyond the scope of what we can provide in a tool. That kind of helped define what it is that we put into this new module. So looking at overall progress, we want to look at absolute changes, like I said. So the regular re-inventory is really important, and as some of those slides that I showed before on the activity in ClearPath illustrates, that people are doing that, and people are being able to look at those changes over time. We also maybe want to do things like look at changes against a hypothetical. So how are we doing compared to business as usual? How are we doing compared to a cap? How do individual measures stack up against what we planned in the cap? So those are all things that we want to be able to understand better. And lastly, understanding drivers, and this is one that we started off with a pretty ambitious idea of being able to look at all these things, and my future should have popped up now. But so there are things that are going to change our emissions profile beyond the actions that we're taking, right? Population changes, economic activity, and then other sorts of things that exogenous variables like changes in weather year to year and fuel prices. And really what we ended up doing is having to draw a line between, these two things like population, economic activity. These are things that we can understand through indicators and is information that generally you'll have access to in the course of creating an inventory. Things like response to weather, fuel prices, maybe some behavior change stuff, that really looks, really to do that well requires developing models of your city and having very, very fine-grained data on energy use, at the very least monthly sort of resolution. And we know from our experience that most cities simply don't have that because of how we typically get this information from the utilities. Aggregate data, not always that useful for being able to develop the complex models to understand these things. So it's something that we're aware of and that we're thinking of. In the future, will we have some features that do that part of it too? I think we will, especially as that the condition of the resolution of data that U.S. practitioners and local governments can get your hands on, I think is changing fairly rapidly, whether it's because you're doing disclosure ordinances, because utilities and some of the things that like the Department of Energy's Green Button Initiative and related things that they are doing are really starting to change the dynamic here, where I think that information will be more forthcoming, and then we can build the features to sort of match that when it's there. So hold tight on those kinds of things. So just a quick rundown of what we've got in the tool now before I jump into the demo. What are the things that we can now do with the features of the monitoring module? One, we want to be able to build some bottom-up context to the results of an inventory. Understand the performance of implemented measures, which is great. Provide a centralized location for keeping track of all your implementation activities. So this is, again, if you're collaborating with other people in your local government that are sort of all working in ClearPath and implementing different actions. Here you have one place where everybody can log in, keep track of what they're doing, and then you can sort of keep tabs on that with the idea that it would help you report those at some point, and you don't have to go scrambling around and looking for different reports and asking people, well, what all have we accomplished? If it's in one place, then you can report it much more easily. And this will tie in to our integration with Carbon and maybe other types of registries, where if it's in ClearPath, then we can create the mechanisms to sort of seamlessly push that information to those other reporting platforms, which is something that we're obviously working on with our partners in Carbon. Yeah, and pretty much went over groundwork for better data sharing, both among yourselves and the global mitigation community. So with that, I'm going to jump over and we'll look at the tool for a little bit, and then we will stop and take some questions. So here we are on the tool. This should look familiar to all of you. You will find also now there's a monitoring module users guide here with the other users guides, which you should find quite useful as you dive into these new features. I'll look at the community scale track. So jumping in here, we're going to go straight to the monitoring tab. Hopefully everybody is familiar with the sort of tab structure here, from inventories, forecast, planning, and now monitoring. And what you'll see here is a pretty short list. Not like the other places where there are tons and tons of calculators to find and find ones that are specific for a type of measure. It's really just a reflection of the broad categories that went into the inventory. So we've got sort of community type categories here. If I back up and go over to the government track, we can see, okay, same basic structure of being able to record actions within government operations. I'll go back to community now, where I've got some data here. And as we click on one, let's just say residential energy, I'll do a quick overview of what we find here. Of course, there are these kind of global settings, factor sets that you may want to use, global warming potential that you want to apply to this calculation. These two are new specifically for the purposes of monitoring. One, it's important to know what year this happened in, and the idea is that for each monitoring record, this does represent a single year of impact that has been created. So it should fit in nicely with the way that other folks, whether it's action registries, can conceive of the impact of 1 year's worth of a project. The next drop down is a connection to reduction strategies, and as we look at this, I see a few different named measures in here, and essentially what this is doing is it's looking back at measures that I have created in maybe created previously in a plan. So if I go back and look over here at my reduction strategies, well, I can see I've got a whole bunch here. But there's residential PV things. Because we're in residential, it's going to limit this list to only residential type things. If I back up here really quick, just for example purposes, and I look at transportation, then I could connect this to a transportation measure, for example. So hopefully keeps those lists manageable. And this is really important if you want to compare the impact of this action to what you had planned to do in a measure. You don't have to do that. This is not required to do, except if you want to run a few of the different comparison reports, which we'll go over here in a few minutes. Like everything, we can name a record. Hopefully something that's useful. The next few fields are really about implementation status, especially if these things are planned or in progress. Definitely helps us for ICLEI from being able to see what kinds of things are going on. This will also be really important for the case of when you do come to the point of wanting to share this information, whether the status of these things are really important. You can list a point person, next steps. This is just kind of general stuff that may be useful for you to share internally, so that other folks on your team kind of know what's up with the various measures. Next, we've got a little section on financing where you can record capital costs, any new operation and maintenance costs for this action, as well as cost savings that you're gaining out of it. Financing type, just a general categorization of how is it that you're financing this thing, and then an open text field for saying, where did this ultimately, what did this come from, whether it was the grant program or something else. So mostly information that again is going to be useful for you internally just for record keeping purposes. Next up is the impacts achieved, and this, rather than having a million different inputs for you to have to pick from, because of course you could be reducing lots of different fuel types here in the residential category, And of course, you can imagine what this would look like in other sectors. But essentially now you can say, well, this saved electricity and natural gas and propane. And the tool will be responsive and only give you the inputs that you would need to fill out for that, so you don't have to wade through lots and lots of different inputs. So you can hold down Control and select multiples, or just select one. Standard procedure for any of these things. Enter in how much electricity you save, and that's going to start giving us some outputs in here. None of those other, well, I don't want to say none. The financing things do have some outputs, so we'll put in some money here, just for an example of capital costs and electricity saved. Lastly, how did you figure this out? The evaluation details is pretty important. So when we're trying to figure out, well, is this kind of a back of the envelope calculation? Is this from a wider program evaluation? And the values that are listed here are different for the different calculators. So if you're in government operations, you'll see things like the IVMVP methods as the different approaches that you could have taken to determine building energy savings, for example. So you can always say it was other if it's not in the list, and we can add more values to these lists if folks are finding themselves running into things that we don't have basically a bucket for. So again, this will be certainly useful information when we get to the point of sharing this. People will be able to understand sort of what's the provenance of this data that they're looking at, and how much may they expect that they could achieve a similar result, for example. The outputs are pretty straightforward. The energy that you said you saved, the emissions that resulted from that, and finally a cost effectiveness. So again, we didn't say that we saved all these other fuel types, but if we did, they would populate. Lastly, we can add, just like any other record in ClearPath, you can add any kind of notes that you want. A new feature that we added here is the ability to attach a document. So if this came from a consultant report or something else, whatever you referenced, if you want to include that, it's your standard attach a document kind of functionality, and again, really great for your internal team and keeping people in sync, making sure that whether it's someone you work with now or maybe it's the future person in your position, which always happens, they'll have something to go on and continue your work. So that's the basics of a measure record. They generally, one other thing that I didn't describe about connecting to a reduction strategy. So in this case, I'm going to pick this residential PV promotion, and we get one other input here, which is pretty crucial, at least for a certain type of report, that pulls in basically the linked input from those reduction calculators that it may be linked to. So this residential PV promotion was really the thing that drove that calculation when we were developing the plan. The main driver was, what did we think was going to be the increased solar capacity? And if I go in here and we can go find this record, just for example. So we were saying that we're gonna increase by 7,500, and then when I come in here, I can say, okay, well, maybe we only did for this year, instead of 7,500, maybe it was 7,400, or whatever it is, and then you'll be able to also see from the reports, are we implementing our cap according to what we plan to, which could be a useful explanation as to whether or not you're hitting your targets. So on the subject of calculators, I'm going to turn back really quick and talk about something that's new in the inventory calculators that's relevant here for monitoring, and then we'll look at the reports. So if I go to one of my inventory calculators here, there's a new input here called grouping tags. And grouping tags are essentially that. It is a way to group your different inventory records in ways that were not necessarily easy to do before. Somewhat inspired by the list manager from CACP, where let's say you wanted to look across buildings and fleet vehicles and lots of other things in government operations and separate out, these are parks, these are police department, what have you. You could use grouping tags to do that, and then as you maybe pull out your detailed reports on the inventory, you would be able to easily sort by those grouping tags and create your own charts that compare different departments. Or maybe this is, as is shown here, maybe it's zip codes if you have some zip code specific energy data, for example, or whatever kinds of groupings make sense for what you're trying to do. Hopefully it works well for you in that way. Another thing that is useful is it's set up with an autocomplete, so it will remember anybody in your city that is working on this. If somebody has developed a tag for multifamily, then they don't necessarily have to type it in all the time. Like, they'll be able to connect and find the way that you're organizing things. Hopefully keeps everybody sort of collectively better organized. So that's a quick note on grouping tags, and I will probably come back to this to illustrate how these work for the purposes of looking at indicators. And maybe that's where I'll start, actually, to not skip around too much. As you all know, there are the ability to create indicators with lots, most of the different types of records have some indicator values. If I go in here, I'll go to an existing record here, and I can see I've got some indicators as part of this record. Now as I go, I'll just keep that one there, and I'm going to take this tab over to reports, and the first report that we'll look at is this indicator report. What we can see here now is the same records. We can see my grouping tags here. Those were the ones that we were using. And I have two inventories in here, right? I have a 2005 inventory and a 2010. And now what I'm able to do is start to see how these indicators are changing over time. And as I create more and more re-inventories, we'll get more and more columns sort of feeding on here to the right. And you'll be able to see how energy use per household or energy use per person is changing over time. So maybe even if things are growing, if the total is growing, then you can tell, again, that more nuanced story about, well, things are still getting more efficient, which can be important. Now, the way that the grouping tags work and the way that this entire function works is it figures out which values to match based on two things. One, the record name. So it's going to first look for things in both these inventories that have the same record name. And then it's going to group them according to this tag. So even though I have each one of these records is named the same, they have two different grouping tags. One is this, and this is probably not the most elegant description of this, but some of these are tagged with this zip code, some of these are tagged as saying they're multifamily. Well, it's using that to decipher, okay, of all these things that have the same record name, these ones are actually related because they're the multifamily ones, and these ones are the ones that I should relate based on the zip code. So it's going to use those two factors to figure out what it should match and display in that way. If you have basically anything that either doesn't have both a match on the record name and a match on a grouping tag, it will not show up in this report. Because there's lots of other records in both of these inventories, but these are the only ones that we have set up here. So if I go back over to my records, and I can look at this propane consumption, and let's edit that. And let's say I'm going to add that grouping tag to it, and it's called community propane consumption, and we'll just save it like that. And this is in my 2005 inventory, so now let's go to the 2010. Same name. We'll edit that. And let's add that same grouping tag. Save it. Now I can come back here and refresh this report, and we should see some new. There we go. And there's our propane indicators for those 2 years. So that's how that report works. Should be pretty useful, especially again for folks that have many inventories in there. Should be able to see some very interesting trends. Other reports that we have here, I'm going to run through these fairly quickly, just in the interest of time. Maybe we'll have a little less than 15 minutes at the end. Implementation progress report. So this is a whole new section of reports here. And really what most of these will ask you to do is select a planning scenario. And the idea being that those monitoring records that we looked at just a few moments ago, how do those compare to a plan? And in this case, really that performance for folks that have used the planning module and are familiar with it, it's not just what you get from filling out that calculator in terms of what we project the impact will be, but it's really when you go and you run a scenario plan, right? So this cap scenario. How did things play out when I actually applied them over these spans of time? That's what it's going to look for. So it's going to compare it against whatever the settings of this plan were, and as you know, you can create many different versions of plans. So the idea here, when we run the report, select the plan that we want to compare to, and in that, there we can see, in this case, that same residential PV promotion. Here's what we plan to do: 500 a year, every year. We actually, from the different records that I've created 3 monitoring records here for 2012, 2013, and 2014. And then what was the gap between those values? So we were a little bit behind here. We were ahead of the game in 2013 and ahead of the game in 2014. Reports. Very similar kind of report is this implementation efficacy report. So did we get what we thought out of it? Was the impact the same? And this is in terms of CO2e. So this is what we plan to reduce. This is what we actually reduced, and that I probably have entered in a wrong number in that one, but these are more realistic. That's user entry here or there. And we can say that, okay, look, we are a little bit actually behind the game on these. And you can imagine, as this is just for a single measure. Sorry to go back, but just a single measure, that residential energy one. If you have lots and lots of measures, that screen would be full of data. Implementation details, we can see here really quickly. This is just going to show, it's similar to the inventory details and show you all the inputs and outputs from everything if you want to hang on to that for reference purposes. The implementation status report, this is a quick one that if people are asking, well, what's going on with our measures, it's really just these status fields from the different records that you've created. So I have my 4 residential PV records, and if I had completed these, then it would hopefully be some useful information to share with folks. Next one, this is one of my favorites of the new stuff, projected actual details. So this is really looking at understanding trends in those from one inventory to the next, and what it's going to do is it will take, if you have more than one inventory, it will compare those inventory totals to something else, whether it's a plan or it could be just your business as usual. So let's take a look at that. This is a business as usual that was started in 2005, where my inventory started. And take a minute here. And so I can see across my 2005 and 2010 inventories, I get actual summarized usage here, residential electricity or propane or whatever it is. I get, again, this usage value in whatever the units are, the resulting CO2. The predicted is what was in that forecast or what was in that plan. So I can look at those values and say, okay, am I on track or not? And then there's a nice little visualization that does it at the kind of sector level, where you can say, what did we think was going to happen in the business as usual case? What actually happened? So in this case, residential energy we predicted was going to grow at business as usual, but it really went down. These charts get much more interesting when you have more than just 2 inventories, and you can start to see sort of different trends. Maybe it was going up one year and then going down the next year. Can be pretty useful. Projected actual summary. This is just going to kind of show the a single inventory, so I can look at that, just the 2010 against the projected in that kind of a standard chart that you've seen from the inventory, and again say how far off are we at this sector level, so summarized at the sector level. And that indicator report we already looked at. Lastly, I want to show a couple things real quick. We've done a few new things with inventory records, where previously we had things you could either look by scope if you're doing things by the global protocol for community scale emissions, or by activity source according to the US protocol. We now have these two, this one and this one, that give us an additional breakdown of the sectors within those. So I can look at my scope 1, 2, 3 here and see the sectors within the scopes, which is I think a little more meaningful than just seeing those kind of highest aggregation. So another little feature that we added along with the other things here. Also, finally, forecast and planning exports. These were previously only available within a forecast and within the planning, but now you can come and export all the different forecast and planning scenario, those exported CSV files, all in one place. So that's it for the demo. I think we will now turn it over to questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. That was a wonderful onboarding of the new monitoring module. We had a few questions that came in, and hopefully I'd answered them to the best of my ability. But first question came from Tobin Freeb in Durham, North Carolina, which was, do you need to enter in a recurring action each year for the monitoring module, or do you have the option of saving it or saying it recurs every year and have it automatically reproduce itself?
It's a good question. Right now it is set that really you would have to enter in a new record for every year. We are looking at a few different directions that we could take with that. One, similar to what you suggest, that you could say, okay, this occurs annually, year over year. That actually probably fits very well with the way that the planning module works. I've also thought, though, that maybe there's enough variation year to year that it's, I don't want to set it up where you may be copying a bunch of information that may not necessarily be true. And an easy thing that we may do is basically allow you to clone a record and say, okay, I want to make a copy of this, similar to what you can do with a planning action. It's like, make a copy of everything, and then you can just change the year, and maybe that achieves savings value, because those are things that I do expect to change year to year, and I would like to make sure.
Oh, it looks like we lost Mike for a second. Hopefully he'll jump back right. He'll jump back on. As you probably will know, technology can be a bear at times.
Anything else? Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, you cut out. But yeah, the next question is piggybacking off of that one, which is ultimately, do you enter in the impacts achieved in just 1 year or cumulative? So that pretty much, as I mentioned to her, it was impacts achieved will be entered on an annual basis as opposed to cumulative. But the reporting tab allows for you actually to look at year-over-year impact.
Right, right. You can always do that summing in the reports, and another thing that I've thought about, a need that I know some people are interested in is, how these kinds of things may play with local governments that maybe want to interact with carbon markets of some kind. And in that frame, I was thinking, okay, will really probably be better for everyone to have this concept of it's the emissions reductions associated with a calendar year. Will at least facilitate folks that have this as part of their forays into that world.
Great, thank you. And then last question thus far has came from Suzanne Cotty at the Piedmont Association of Governments in Arizona. And in terms of the monitoring module for the record, so electricity saved, is that linked to local utility and the emission factor for that year?
Yes, so in this case you would be putting in, again, very similar to your inventory records, or whatever factor set you want it to be for. Should be yes, the emissions factor for that year.
Excellent. And then moving on, we have a question that came in. How do you suggest to delineate, if at all, community-wide emissions reported under the significant influence framework? Would this delineation be useful?
That is a really good question, and one of the things that we are also planning for next year, although it's not maybe one of the flashy things that we try to promote in terms of exciting things, but adding those reporting frameworks is absolutely something that we intend to do. Not only have them reflected in monitoring, but across the board, particularly in inventories, and letting you run those specific reports and look at significant influence types of sources only, or the 5 basic generating activities only. So it's on our radar to add in that additional structure, and part of that was waiting for the final publication of the Global Community Protocol, which has its own sort of reporting structures that are similar, called Basic and Basic Plus, and just making sure that when we build those features in, we can accommodate them both elegantly.
Great, thanks. So we have about 5 minutes left. Are there any other questions? I know someone had raised their hand at one point, and that had disappeared, but are there any other folks who have questions in particular about either the inventory module, forecast planning, or the monitoring module?
If not, there's probably a few other things that I can do here for the next couple minutes. You know, I ran through this basic, the residential energy calculator pretty quick. You know, some of these are different depending on what it is. You know, these energy ones, obviously you put in the energy saved, and it will do the emissions calculation. Another, I guess, it's a limitation on some of these other things like transportation, where, you know, what I didn't want to do is start making this into a having people redo all the inventory calculations over again. So, you know, essentially you would identify what it is that you're saving here. It's on-road BMT, it's gasoline, maybe it's gasoline and diesel. You could say, you know, in this case, how many BMT were reduced, but it doesn't do the emissions calculation here. And, you know, I also sort of reasoned, and people feel free to write me nasty emails, but reason that if you have done that you know, big external evaluation study on how much BMT was reduced by some action, you've probably also figured out this number through that study and would be able to record it here. So the tool doesn't do this, and then we don't have to get into making sure that all the emissions factors are lined up with, you know, whomever it is that did that study. So hopefully it's cleaner that way, and not a limitation for you know, not being able to do that calculation within the tool. And the same really goes across the board for all the different types of activity to emissions calculations that aren't really straightforward, like energy.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. One final question that came in, also a good one that piggybacks off of the last question about the significant influence framework. Again, regarding the SI framework for now, would tagging be an option to group these particular records?
Yeah, actually, I think that would work quite well, and you can add more than one tag to a record, so you may be able to both do that for significant influence and then have some other tagging scheme going on as well. But if you just want to use it for that, actually, that great idea. I love it when people get creative with what we put together.
Great. So for folks to understand that, in order to capitalize on the tagging functionality, you could definitely leverage that to tag them within the significant influence framework or another framework that you have actually identified for your inventories. And then finally, next question again from Suzanne Cotty at PAG. Just 2 fuel choices on the monitoring module, savings calculations when you change fuel type, say from diesel to biodiesel.
Hmm. Yeah, I can add more fuel types. Good call.
Okay, great.
Yes, adding those choices is certainly something that we can do. And yeah, as folks know, we're always building new things here and filling out all the calculators to try and hit all the different possible things that the folks on the line are up to. So yeah, we can do that. Thanks for the suggestion, Suzanne.
Perfect. Well, we have hit the top of the hour, and we have one final question that hopped in. Great. Let's see. While you're at it, considering adding CNG and LPG as fuel types too, I'm wondering if those are in reference to vehicles or in the built environment. Vehicles.
They are on the fleet side, but I suppose that these things exist in the wider community as well. But they should be right. You've got the whole much bigger list of fuels to choose from in the on the fleet side.
Oh, great. So yeah, the question does come in with regards to the city fleet. So to Hadi, yes. So that would be on the local government operations side. We were mostly focusing on the community side, but yes, we have a whole suite of fuel types that local governments use within their vehicle fleet.
You do them all.
Excellent. So yeah, if Mike, you could pull up the PowerPoint again just to provide our contact information, and we can wrap it up for today.
Good call.
So again, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. We are truly excited about releasing the monitoring module that completes the suite of modules within ClearPath, our online emissions management platform. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact Mike or myself. Here's our email addresses, and I also will be following up with an email to all attendees and registrants that just have a couple bit of the resources that we have discussed today, and also the link to the YouTube video for today's recording, just in case you want to forward that on to other staff members or other folks in your network. So again, we would like to thank everybody for joining us today, and we are appreciative for all our members and for all the users that are in ClearPath and helping us move the needle in terms of getting folks to inventory, forecast, track, and monitor their municipal and community scale emissions. So again, thanks to all the folks who tuned in across the United States and across the globe. And again, Mike, thanks for your expertise and your knowledge in developing this platform and bringing it to the marketplace. So again, from all of us at ICLEI USA, thanks so much, and we look forward to working with all of you very soon. Have a great day.
Well.